Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It was like the presidential election never ended. Donald Trump's 77-minute press conference last night has been described as unprecedented, unhinged, or, according to his chief of staff, a fantastic job. And jobs, specifically American ones, are at the centre of Mr. Trump's speech tonight in Charleston, South Carolina. Speaking at a Boeing plant in the last half hour, he warned that firms which fired American workers and moved overseas would pay a heavy price. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, reports.
My fellow Americans,
the president's weekly address, on message, on auto cue.
I was thrilled to host the White House's Women's Business Leaders Roundtable. Very exciting, great women.
Such a contrast to yesterday's wild ride press conference.
I want to find a friendly reporter.
He berated a reporter who prefaced a question about the rise of anti-Semitic attacks by saying no one was accusing the president himself of anti-Semitism.
Number one, I am the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen in your entire life. Quiet, quiet, quiet. See, he lied about he was going to get up and ask a very straight, simple question. So, you know, it's welcome to the world of the media.
Never met.
The media, even the ever-faithful Fox News, is reeling, especially shocked at the president's evasive responses about Russian hacking.
It's crazy what we're watching every day. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. He keeps repeating ridiculous throwaway lines that are not true at all and sort of avoiding this issue of Russia as if we're some kind of fools for asking the question. Really? Your opposition was hacked and the Russians were responsible for it, and your people were on the phone with Russia on the same day it was happening, and we're fools for asking the questions? No, sir. We are not fools for asking these questions, and we demand to know the answer to this question. You owe this to the American people. Your supporters will support you either way. If your people were on the phone with her, what were they saying? We have a right to know.
The forced resignation of National Security Advisor Michael Flynn over questionable links with Russia is roiling not only the White House but the Kremlin. Russian TV stations have abruptly stopped mentioning President Trump. They didn't cover yesterday's press conference after weeks of fawning coverage. And one newspaper warned today against excessive Trumpophilia. It's all becoming quite tricky. General Robert Harwood, the president's first choice to replace Flynn, has turned down the job, and dozens of other administration positions remain unfilled.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
But now, back to the part of the job he really likes. The pomp and ceremony, the cheering crowds. Today at a Boeing factory in South Carolina, reinforcing his message about jobs to the voters who put him in the White House.
As your president, I'm going to do everything I can to unleash the power of the American spirit and to put our great people back to work.
And tomorrow, he's off to his resort retreat at Mar-a-Lago and to a rally to address not the despised media, but his adoring fans.
Well, I'm now joined from Boston by Julius Krein, founding editor of American Affairs, an academic journal exploring the Trump movement. And from New York is Versha Sharma, the managing editor of Now This News. Julius Krein first, do you have any qualms about Donald Trump's performance yesterday?
Well, I was, of course, quite sympathetic with a number of the criticisms Trump raised against the bipartisan status quo during the campaign, and I'm still broadly optimistic about what the administration could theoretically accomplish. But I am very concerned and have been disappointed by the delays in getting qualified, capable people into the government and into the administration to be able to actually accomplish parts of this agenda. I think there are still far too many openings, especially in the State Department and now in the NSC. which need to be filled.
But specifically about his performance in front of the media there, I mean, the former Republican advisor, Gabriel Schoenfeld, wrote today that there was something deeply worrying with our president and the country is in danger. He described the performance as delusional. Do you share those concerns?
Well, the media, of course, cares a lot about press conferences. I'm not sure that anyone else does. I'm far more concerned about what's going on behind the scenes, or in this case, what's not happening and what's not getting done. The media circus will always be there. Unfortunately, it's become part of our politics, and this is the way he deals with it. But I'm much more interested in the actual things that are not happening.
Varsha Sharma, is the media getting too obsessed with what happened yesterday, or are you concerned about the ranting and raving as it was described by the president, semi-ironically himself?
Yeah, I think there's a balance to strike. I think that Julius is right in that maybe there's a lot of Trump's base who didn't watch his daytime press conference, but they're certainly seeing the clips that are coming out after. And these clips are all about Trump, right? It's all about his war on the press and about how he feels like he's been unfairly maligned, even though what's happening behind the scenes, as Julius mentioned, is actually pretty chaotic. So I think there are legitimate concerns that the press and the American public have about a display like what happened at the press conference yesterday. And it's not even just the ranting and raving, right? It's the fact that he is dodging questions or flat out lying in some cases. And so that's what's really important.
But then he's winning.
A president.
Then
Yes.
he's winning then, isn't he? If he's getting his message across and, you know, distracting attention away from the whole hoo-ha over Russia.
Well, I mean, I think that's debatable because you have, as you guys played, you have Shep Smith of Fox News going off and saying that what we're seeing is crazy. So I think, you know, once you start to lose Fox News, then you should probably recalibrate your media strategy.
Well, Julius Krein, I mean, you say the media is becoming sort of too obsessed with the media themselves, but has this hounding of journalists gone too far? I mean, it wasn't a comfortable spectacle watching the president berate the Jewish journalist at the press conference, was it?
Yeah, I think at this point it's probably not helpful. It is just part of the media circus in our politics. But again, I think in a sense Trump would be better served by, you know, skipping the press conferences and focusing more on filling out the administration and actually getting a team in place to develop and implement policy. But with respect to the media and, you know, the treatment of the media, I'm not that concerned about it. I'm not sure, you know, any real voters are either.
Varsha Sharma, the public's going to be with Donald Trump on a lot of what he said yesterday and against what he called the dishonest media, aren't they?
They are. So I think what's important to remember is Trump's attacks on the press may play well with his base, but they don't necessarily play well with facts. And if he continues to dodge questions, distract from issues, and not actually bring jobs back to the American people, then I think he'll start losing people quite quickly. I did speak to Trump supporters here who said that they were concerned by the fact that he can't really seem to give a coherent answer on some of these more concerning issues.
Well, a lot of the journalists, though, rather than tackling him on the facts, sort of played along and were quite happy, apparently, to be the butt of his jokes.
Yeah, the joking that we saw back and forth between some of the reporters, I think, was not the right take for the White House press corps to take. But more importantly, as you mentioned, the Jewish reporter and then also April Ryan, an African-American reporter that he asked if she knows any black members of Congress. These are the moments that we need to highlight and be talking about because they really show what Trump thinks of minorities.
Julius Krein, away from the press conference, chaos reigns. You'd agree with that statement?
Well, that may be a little much, but there's certainly a lot of things that need to get done that haven't been concluded yet.
Julius Krein, Varsha Sharma, thank you very much for joining us.
After his fiery attack on the press last night, Donald Trump stuck to script a little more tonight as he told workers at a factory in South Carolina that he would be putting American business and jobs first. It was well received in a state that voted firmly in his favour in last year's election. And putting the chaos of the last few days behind him, it was a reminder perhaps of how he managed to win 63 million votes.
If the White House has felt like a bunker these last 4 weeks, this morning the president left it for a long weekend. 2 of his grandchildren clutching his hand. and stopping for a wave as they walked to Marine One.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
After the wild ride of yesterday's combative press conference, today's appearance at a Boeing factory in front of hundreds of cheering workers was visibly uplifting for Trump. His protectionist message in South Carolina, a state he easily won, was always going to be a successful antidote to the critics circling him in Washington.
We want products made by our workers in our factories, stamped with those 4 magnificent words: made in the USA. We are going to fight for our jobs. We are going to fight for our families. And we are going to fight to get more jobs and better paying jobs for the loyal citizens of our country. Believe me. You've heard me say it before, and I will say it again. From now on, it's going to be America first.
This is all much more comfortable territory for the president compared to the bruising questions in Washington about his chaotic White House or his personal connections to Russia. After the fall of General Mike Flynn, Trump is still struggling to fill the key job of National Security Advisor. Admiral Robert Harwood, who Trump wanted at his side, has taken the extraordinary step of refusing to serve. Yesterday's press conference is being widely viewed as one of the most bizarre ever witnessed in the White House, during which he berated reporters.
The press, honestly, is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control.
And attacked his own intelligence officers.
The people that gave out the information to the press should be ashamed of themselves. Really ashamed.
We have a lot to talk about. It is our top story.
TV networks were still reacting in near disbelief today.
That would have been a really funny hour or so of television if he weren't president of the United States.
Even an anchor on Trump-friendly Fox News decided to air his own outrage.
No, sir. We are not fools for asking this question, and we demand to know the answer to this question. You owe this to the American people.
But to head out of Washington, this is Harper's Ferry in West Virginia, is to see again how the conventional wisdom about this presidency is often wrong, and that Trump's core supporters still relish his maverick approach.
I think when they say give him a chance, they need to do just that. He may be green around the ears, but, you know, with compassion and prayer, this man is going to make it.
I think he's done some interesting things. There have been some missteps, but I think things are going in the proper direction.
The president is tonight in Florida, heading to his own golf resort to take stock after another tumultuous week dominated by policy disarray and staffing crises.
And Robert Moore joins me live from Washington. So, Robert, Trump tonight moving on from those clashes with the media and back to core commercial values.
Yeah, look, it may not be saying that much, but it really does feel, in the eyes of many people, this was one of the more successful days of his presidency. After yesterday veering into pretty bizarre exchanges, today he was really in a much more familiar campaign-style appearance, sticking to a sort of protectionist and pro-worker script that has obviously worked for him in the past before, but way too early, Alistair, to talk about this stabilizing his presidency. The Russia questions, for example, won't go away. And next week, also, for example, he needs to try and reissue this highly controversial executive order that covers the travel ban. That will open up a whole new range of political and legal questions for him. And emerging from the Department of Homeland Security tonight, the Department of Homeland Security tonight, was this 11-page memo that appears to be talking about using the National Guard to round up undocumented workers. Now, that type of militarization of immigration policy would be obviously vastly controversial. The White House tonight saying it's 100% true, but it does remind you what one Republican senator here has said tonight, that it still seems this White House is just not ready for prime time.
Robert, thank you.
Well, after the extraordinary verbal fireworks of Donald Trump's White House press conference yesterday, followed by the news that his pick to replace Michael Flynn as National Security Advisor had declined the job, the US president attended to business. He signed a measure to roll back a coal mining rule of the previous administration, a promise made in the campaign. Today, he travelled to Charleston, where he unveiled the latest Boeing Dreamliner, the biggest to date. Donald Trump, accused of chaos, insists his administration is a well-oiled machine, putting election pledges into practice. So 4 weeks in, away from all the noise, is he actually getting anywhere and delivering his promises? Here's David Grossman.
For a man with a fresh election victory, Donald Trump seems to have an urgent need to compare himself with his predecessors to prove that Trump tops.
We have made incredible progress. I don't think there's ever been a president elected who in this short period of time has done what we've done.
Some of the president's boasts are easily disproved.
I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan.
A quick glance at the facts shows this is nonsense.
Thank you very much. Oh.
This kind of howler, Mr. Trump's battles with the courts and the intelligence services and of course the media, have rather been dominating news cycles. But are we missing significant progress on the new president's agenda?
I have to tell you, I spent a lot of time on the road the last 30 days, and once you get out of the Washington, D.C. bubble, there are a lot of people in the United States who are very happy with Trump, happy with his style, happy that he's really disrupting and doing what he said he's going to do. So it's something that I would say, don't pay attention to all the media and all the polls. I'd wait a little bit longer to see what the American people have to say about his presidency at this juncture.
1 month into his 48-month term, Mr. Trump already claims numerous ticks on his to-do list. In terms of changing Washington, he's nominated a new justice for the Supreme Court. He's imposed a hiring freeze on non-essential federal workers and a temporary halt on new federal regulations. And he says he's negotiated and saved money on US government contracts. In trade policy, he's withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and he says eliminated regulations for some US manufacturers. On immigration, his travel ban on 7 majority Muslim countries has of course been spectacularly overturned, though he has introduced a 4-month ban on new refugees. He's reaffirmed his commitment on a wall on the Mexican border and brought in a crackdown on so-called sanctuary cities who refuse to comply with US federal law. There have, of course, been spectacular upsets too, losing his National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and a failure to answer straight questions on his administration and before that his campaign's contacts with Russia.
There are elements of this transition that have proven to be challenging. I don't think that's unusual for any presidential transition. If you look back to 2008 when President Obama was first elected, there were some bumps in the road there. So clearly there have been some challenges. On the other hand, I do think that some of this is probably overblown in the sense that the president is still engaging in executive action. He does still have a functional relationship, functional at the very least, certainly, with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, the Republican leaders in the Congress. So I would say that the overall assessment is that, things could be going better, but they probably could be going worse too.
The president was in South Carolina today at Boeing at the launch of a new aircraft. A technological marvel, no doubt, but nothing to do with decisions he's made. Nevertheless, a neat backdrop for him to restate his campaign promise.
I campaigned on the promise that I will do everything in my power to bring those jobs back into America. We wanted to make much easier, it has to be much easier to manufacture in our country and much harder to leave. I don't want companies leaving our country.
The details of exactly how he's going to do that, just one of many key areas where details are still sketchy. For example, repealing and replacing Obamacare, the new infrastructure plan and the new tax-cutting plan are as yet still just campaign promises.
The infrastructure, I still think that there's a lot of disharmony amongst House Republicans regarding the size and scope of that. So if you're going to look at what's really going to come down the pike next, I think it's immigration, tax cuts, and Obamacare.
Mr. President, you've been in office for just 4 weeks.
And yet, we've made so much progress.
The people who've always laughed at Donald Trump have certainly had plenty more material to work with. but they are not who the president needs to worry about. It's what his voters think, and for them, perhaps, it's still early days.
It's not my problem.
David Grossman, well, does the American media give Donald Trump due credit for what he's delivering? We were hoping to be joined by a member of Trump's economic transition team, but sadly they just pulled out as we came on air. But with me now from Boston, we're delighted to have Joe Abrahamson, the former executive editor of the New York Times. Good evening to you. Jill Abrahamson, you have seen 3 administrations come in with all the complexity of that. How does this rate in terms of chaos?
It's disorderly, that's for sure. I'd put it on the upper end of the scale, but you know, there have been bumpy beginnings. I remember covering, you know, the new Clinton administration in the early 1990s, and he had to go through 2 failed attorney general nominees, and finally got his appointee confirmed on the 3rd try. So that isn't that unusual, but yeah, the amount of confusion and leaking and plotting against one another already visible inside the White House this time, I would say, is unusual. And you know, the Flynn matter, I think, is a quite serious one indeed.
But is it the case, though, looking at this, you know, as a former editor of the New York Times, that actually it's actually hard, it sort of sticks in the craw of the liberal media to give him any credit for what's actually being done? It is easier to jeer from where they sit.
I think that's really nonsense. I think that the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal have given extensive coverage to everything from the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the president's meeting with Wall Street bankers last Friday, to what's happening at the State Department, to the trade treaties. I mean, the substance of what is happening is being covered by the media. I would argue that Trump himself is causing tremendous distraction with these ceaseless attacks on the media, which, you know, I think those are overblown.
But isn't it the case it's because the media, to some extent, finds what he's actually doing objectionable and makes that clear, and that is out of touch with actually the many millions that voted for him, that there is now a disconnect between the liberal media in the cities and actually what's going on in the rest of the United States?
Well, you know, it's clear that many people in the United States have a lack of trust in the news media. That's been true for a long time. That's not something new with the election of Donald Trump. But I certainly don't agree with you that the coverage of the substance of what's happening in the White House is being covered by the liberal media in an unfair way. I think the facts are being told, and that, you know, as they should, the news media and the best parts of it, including the New York Times, are doing what the First Amendment asks the press to do, which is to hold power accountable, and that's what they are doing.
I wonder, though, in the end, if you look at these White House briefings and you look at the press conferences, whether actually it plays to Trump's own agenda, actually, as you were saying, the media is unpopular anyway, to go on the attack. Right. And actually what happens is the media kind of plays into that.
I totally agree with that. And I think what the media has to stop doing is covering itself and the battle between the new president and itself. And it needs to just do its work. Follow the news, get behind the news, and inform the public. Stop being self-referential and self-obsessed.
Jill Abrahamson, thank you very much indeed.
I've been getting away